Hello and welcome to the Raising Killen podcast. My name is Marsha Naidu and I blog at raisingkillen.org, where we curate resources for families experiencing disabilities. Today, guys, is a super exciting guest that's going to be joining us. Jerri Green is here with us today, and she will be running in 2026 to be the next governor of Tennessee. Welcome to the Raising Killen podcast, Jerri.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
We're recording this episode on November the 11th. Today is Veterans Day. Let's just take a moment to honor our past and present men and women of the United States Armed Forces for their commitment and service to protect our freedoms. Jerri is a mom. She's a lawyer as well as a public servant raised right here in Tennessee. So to get us started, can you please tell us, Jerri, a little bit about your background and who you are?
Oh, thank you. I was, like you said, born and raised here in Memphis is where I am right now. And I grew up here, left for college to live in Knoxville, where I went to UT. I went from there to Georgetown Law School for a few years, came back to Tennessee and lived in Nashville. I started my career as a public defender. I like to tell people I'm a recovering lawyer now. You outed me as a lawyer right at the beginning. But I was a juvenile public defender, and actually that was my first experience with children with disabilities because many of my clients had IEPs and all of the things, right? The alphabet soup. And that's the first time I learned about the IDEA and all of that. So after I lived in Nashville, I met my husband. We moved back to Memphis to start our family, and I've been here ever since. So I've lived across the whole state. I have 3 kids. I tell people they are my special interest. Mm-hmm. Their names are Bo, Vivian, and Wilder. They are 8, 14, and 15. They are all neurospicy, spectrumy. I live with a house full of, differently, wonderfully able-brained, brilliant children. And my youngest is autistic. But really every issue that I care about, whether it's having a clean environment, having common sense gun legislation so our kids don't have to worry about being shot in schools, you name it, living wages and affordable housing and good public education, all of that matters to me because of my kids.
So, Jerri, the mission of this podcast is to empower and educate families. Now, this title of governor, it's like a really big one, right? This is the highest office in the state of Tennessee. And I'm not sure I rather really understand the responsibilities that comes with governor. Can you briefly give us a little bit of information on this, Jerri?
I would say the 2 biggest things that governors do, the first is set the budget and set the tone through the budget. So, for example, right now, our governor is not only funding vouchers, but he plans to double down on them this next year. And I believe in funding public education. So when you are the governor, you propose and set the budget, which the legislature then votes on. So that's one of the key responsibilities of the governor. Second, and probably, equally important, is working on appointments to various positions. So I think about with children in particular, the Department of Education and DCS. And there's so many different places and spaces that interact with families, whether it's getting benefits out or helping with special education, all of that it starts at the top and the leadership that the governor puts in place. And then the final thing that I would say is really important that a governor does is they set the tone for the priorities of the state, right? I would be a different governor than what we've had in recent memory. Not that we haven't had a Democratic governor, but I would be working on things like livable wages and affordable housing. I would be working on issues like women having the ability to have a say-so over their body, all of those sort of tone-setting things, whether it is when the supermajority GOP legislature passes some hate-filled, discriminatory bill and I veto it, or things like that. That's part of what a governor does too, to stand up, in my opinion, for marginalized communities and show that they matter.
I mean, we've had some governors that have just, I feel, in my opinion, just prioritized working families. And I'm so glad to hear that this is part of your platform. But in your present work, right, you serve as the Deputy Chief of Staff of Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris. We got to hear him speak here in Dyersburg a few months ago, and that was a real special treat. But not only do you work as counsel for Lee Harris, you are also serve on the Memphis City Council. Can you tell us how the work that you do presently lends itself to the office that you are running for?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Lee Harris, so I'm glad you got to experience him in Dyersburg. Everything that I do will inform what I do as governor. I think it's actually an asset to have somebody who's worked first both on a legislative side and in the executive branch, which is what I currently do. I'm overemployed. Some people are unemployed or underemployed. I'm overemployed. But in these roles, what I'm doing every day is, talking to constituents, solving problems that are small on the grand scale, like, hey, my recycling bin's lost. Can you help me get a new one? To bigger issues like paid family leave or IVF funding or criminal justice reform. So I get to be really proximate to people and to their problems, and that helps me find better solutions. And I think that will inform all of my work as governor, because I don't think that, the people that I'm running against have spent decades in DC. I've been right here in Tennessee in Memphis, where we experience the greatest poverty, where we experience just a host of issues from blight to gun violence, right? And having somebody who's been on the ground working through those issues, figuring out how to make public transportation more affordable. When you take that experience into the governor's office, you're taking the people's experience with you. And that's what I plan to do when I get elected.
So 80% of the listeners on the podcast are moms. So I'm going to ask some mom questions now.
I was just grinning when you said that. Yay!
So, public schools, Jerri. In 2024, we got the school voucher program that came up to the Tennessee legislature, and it failed, right? And in January of 2025, that special session was called, and the school voucher program was pushed through and then signed in as the Education Freedom Act. This kind of created 20,000 scholarships, awarding vouchers up to $7,000 per year for children and to families who, it is said, are now given the choice of where they choose to be educated. What is your position on school vouchers?
Well, I would end the voucher scheme on day one. I have 3 children. 2 are in public schools, 1 in private. So there is already school choice. And what we have seen in the disbursement already of the funds is this is just welfare for the wealthy. It's, say, for example, in Memphis, we're seeing it go more in the suburbs, in the wealthy suburbs, not in our inner city, because $7,000 is not enough to help a family pay for the private school educations that can range from $25,000 to $35,000 a year. It's not actually providing any choice. It is just giving money to people who already have it. And at the same time, it is de-investing in the schools that need it most. In our inner city schools, in our rural schools, as I travel around the state, it's funny. I can go to small towns and I can say, what's your high school's mascot? And everybody will say the same thing. And I'll say, what are the colors? And everybody will say the same thing. And you know why? That's because there's just one school. So when we start setting up these voucher schemes, what we do is take away from the school in these small towns. That's why it's historically been incredibly unpopular, even among Republicans, especially among their voters. The problem is we have such a gerrymandered state that the politicians are picking their voters instead of the voters picking the politicians. So even Republicans who might agree that vouchers are not good are forced to have a legislator who feels safe in their seat, not vote the way the people want them to vote. So this is just one of those things that I think is so fundamental. Public dollars belong in public schools. Full stop, the end. That's the whole sentence. I want to see us reinvest in our teachers, in our classrooms, and in our children. You cannot do that if you're constantly pulling money out of the spaces and places they are.
In terms of special education, can you tell us why this area is kind of near and dear to your heart?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, all of my babies have IEPs. My youngest in particular, he requires a one-on-one aid every day. Today, every day is different with an autistic kid. I'll tell you, today luckily it was Veterans Day, but I had to cancel some meetings because the childcare that I had set up, he had a bad day yesterday and they said he can't come back today. And that's just how it is. You have to rearrange your life a little. And my husband is out of the country on work. So, that's fine. We figure it out. And then, for example, tonight, he likes spaghetti and meatballs. I made spaghetti and meatballs. That was not the thing tonight. He wanted a bowl of cereal. So it just, that's how it is with autistic kids. Sometimes they get stuck and they have hard times, but he would not be able to go to a public school if it were not for special education services. And I need those. I want him to be in that setting to get socialization, to get skills that he'll need later on in life, and to be able to get educated. I mean, he's a brilliant kid, but he needs to still learn what a preposition is and the prime meridian, all of those things too, that I can't teach him because I'm working in the government right now and his dad's at FedEx. And we want him to be in public schools and be availed to all that they have to offer. And if public schools don't have special education services, families like mine really suffer. And so it's something that I plan to make a priority in the governor's office in multiple ways, whether it is if DC steps back, I would create emergency funding for student support. We can do that from our rainy day fund that has $2 billion sitting in it. And I would also set up things like they've done in Massachusetts and Minnesota to provide additional state aid per special education student so that we can make sure that services are maintained or expanded. And then I would love to create a Teach Every Child fellowship to attract more teachers to go into special education, especially in underserved areas, whether that's in the inner city or in rural parts of Tennessee.
And I want to touch on the Department of Education. That was created in 1979 by Jimmy Carter. He had the idea that education is the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. And that was why the Department of Education was created. It's a cabinet level agency dedicated to education, but it also protected the civil rights of students and it promoted equal access to a quality education. What is your position on what's happening currently at the Department of Education? And is that something that's worrying to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned Jimmy Carter. Someone recently on one of my stops gave me some Jimmy Carter stamps, and they said he was never supposed to be governor, and then he was never supposed to be president, but he was great at both. And they said, whenever you're feeling discouraged, I want you to look at these. He's a really great man, and that's really a visionary thing that he created. But I agree too, like education is such a cornerstone of our democracy. And as a mom, just as a mom, not as a politician, as a mom, it is terrifying for me to think about my kid either not being able to go to school and us having to figure out homeschooling, or him being in a classroom without all the supports and the protections that he has. It would mean that we would likely have to take him out. And, I say, as somebody, again, who's had kids in private schools, what I was told the first time I ever went to a private school to talk to them about one of my kids going there was, well, we try to be accommodating, but we don't make accommodations. And I just like almost felt sick to my stomach. I know, I felt sick to my stomach. Yeah, one of my kids has misophonia, and other kids like have snacks in class or chew gum, and I was asking for them to be able to wear headphones, just with white noise so that they could block out that noise, not so they couldn't listen to the teacher. They would be on their phone doing whatever. And it was like, that was a no-go for that school. So it was a no-go for me. So I say all that to say, like, for me as a mom, I want my children to be able to go to school and go to art class and music and participate in sports and have dress up day for Halloween or whatever, and all the learning that they do there. And none of that can happen if they don't have these other protections. I witnessed it as a public defender where kids' disabilities would be leveraged against them to kick them out of regular school, to not just have them sent to alternative schools or suspended, but to have them arrested, right? And that's terrifying. I want to make sure wherever I'm at, whatever I'm doing, I'm advocating for kids like mine, for moms like me, and that we continue to have classrooms that support all kids, because every learner is different, right? I mean, we know that on a micro level. Like, some people are visual learners, some people are audio learners, some people learn and, they need to be like stimming on the rug while they learn. We just got to adjust so that everybody can learn, because that's what's important in our society overall. That's what makes us better, is if we have an educated populace.
So, Jerri, generally, like every year, we tend to go to Tennessee Disability Day on the Hill, just to inform legislators as to what's coming down the pipeline that is of special interest to us, but also let them meet our families and have that one-to-one interaction. I think that's so important for families like mine and families like yours to advocate for what's needed, and definitely education is a big priority. I kind of asked the question from our legislator about the block grants that were coming down from a federal level, and that was touted to fund education. And my question is related to that federal funding itself when it's in a block grant. How do you necessarily know if that's appropriated to which line item? Do you have any thoughts on that, Jerri?
Well, all grants from the federal level, because us lawyers are good at, papering up things and adding in layers of bureaucracy. They come with certain restrictions or guidelines. And so whatever we do, we have to consult with the legal department to make sure that it's following the guidelines. That being said, I think there are ways and places in block grants to make sure that we are serving those most in need. And I definitely think our kids are, especially our kids with disabilities. I was just sitting here, like, while you were saying that, thinking how amazing it is that you moms, I assume it's some moms, go and, introduce your families, and how important that is, because I know how hard it is to sit in an IEP meeting and fight for your kid and fight for whatever it is, if they need, a bouncy chair to stem on, or, extra aids or whatever. And all of that requires funding, right? I can't count the number of times I've been in tears in an IEP meeting, because you're fighting for your kid, right? And to think that it all could get hung up on whether a grant gets in the right line item is ridiculous. So again, I will be taking my personal experience in this, but we will be following whatever federal regulations come with the money. And when we see that it's not fully fulfilling the needs of our students, especially our special needs students, then we'll use our budget to make sure that those services are maintained or expanded because it's just too important for families like ours.
So the second point or hot topic I want to hit on is healthcare. And healthcare when it comes to providing healthcare to working families that fall behind the federal poverty level. What is your stance on Medicaid and specifically in Tennessee, TennCare?
Well, I think the very first thing that we need to do is accept the Medicaid expansion money that we continue to send back to the federal government for no reason. That's something that can help make healthcare more accessible and more affordable throughout the state, especially in our rural areas where we've seen too many hospitals close. Um, we do need to make sure that it is quality healthcare. That's something I've heard over and over again, and that we are holding the providers to the highest level of care. But beyond that, I think that the thing I hear over and over again, outside of accessibility, especially among women, because when our rural hospitals close, our women suffer most because there just aren't that many OBs out there that can provide. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maternity and fetal care is just, we're in a desert now. And every time a hospital closes, that means that many more miles a woman has to travel, right? But the other thing I hear about all the time is medical debt for working families. It's the number one thing that people set up GoFundMe's for in our country. And I find that disgusting. People should be able to get healthcare. Healthcare should be a right. So until we get to, some place of like every other democracy around the world, to that point, I think that one of the things my team and I have been working on is a proposal to eliminate some medical debt for those who fall below the poverty line. There's examples out there. I believe in Michigan, Governor Whitmer has done this. So taking some of those, again, TANF funds or some of our reserve funds and quite literally buying medical debt. So, people will sell medical debt for pennies on the dollar, and you can buy medical debt and wipe it out. And the relief that would provide for people, the average income of a family with children in Tennessee is about $82,000. So even if it was people who make $75,000 and less a year, being able to wipe out some or all of their medical debt would be life-changing. And when they're able to take that burden not only off their head and heart, but also off their pocketbooks, they can then contribute more to their communities. And that's good for all of us, right? Because again, when we're spending more in our restaurants or buying houses, that all goes back into our tax fund, which we can then reinvest, say, in our public schools. So I think there are examples out there that we could pull from and put in place here in Tennessee to alleviate some of the immediate need that working families are feeling around the rising cost of healthcare. I am incredibly disappointed in what's happened in DC this week around the compromise. I understand that people were suffering, especially those who receive SNAP benefits or those who are furloughed federal workers. But it was such a righteous fight to say people will not be able to afford healthcare. And that's not just like a social media post. I've talked to people in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee that have said, hey, my rates are going to go from $157 to over $2,000. I just won't have healthcare. And I have these pre-existing conditions. Nobody's going to get me anything cheaper. So I'm terrified for what that means. I will try to remain hopeful that somewhere in this very divided country, we are able to come to our senses and help people. But if we aren't, I think that I hope people hold those responsible Republicans and Democrats alike in the voting booth next fall. And they vote for people like me who are ready with plans to actually help people on the healthcare front.
Talking about plans and some of your record and what you've actually done in championing healthcare and specifically on the nursing fellow program you
Mhm.
created. Can you talk more to that, Jerri, and how that ties in with the social determinants of healthcare?
Yeah. So when the Dobbs decision came down in Tennessee, there was what we call a trigger law, a trigger ban, where essentially we outlawed abortions and those procedures in Tennessee. And now doctors are so fearful. I just can't imagine. I've had 3 children and a miscarriage. I can't imagine my doctor thinking they had to call their lawyer before they gave me a DNC. But I knew
Do
that
you think people really understand that a DNC is actually, or if, an abortion is effectively a
they're both, they're the
DNC?
same.
Yeah, that's the
Right,
same
right.
thing.
I don't know if people do, but I'll say that I had a miscarriage. I had a DNC. That means I've had an abortion. I had to have it or I would go into sepsis and die. And then I wouldn't have had my third child. And my 2 other children would not have a mom. So
Yeah.
it was a medically necessary procedure. And women, you might know the stat more than me, but I think it's like 1 in 4 women experience a miscarriage in their lifetime.
Yes.
So a quarter of the people that you know that are women walking around have had this experience. It's just terrifying. So I knew that, especially in Memphis, so we have an incredibly high fetal and maternal mortality rate and one of the highest in the nation. And it is worse for Black women than for white women. And while we were continuing to work on that through many ways with our health department and our regional medical center, et cetera, I just knew that we were going to have more high risk pregnancies, and that was going to put moms and babies at risk. So I went to Mayor Harris and said, we need to do something. And he was like, well, agreed, but I don't think we can overturn the Supreme Court. He's a lawyer too. He went to Yale. So sometimes he thinks he's smarter than me. And I went to Georgetown. It's okay. I'm pretty smart. I said, well, I want to fund Black midwife fellows. There was a place here called Choices that had a program and they had fellows. And I said, I want to fund 2 more because that's a low entry point for people who might not have, much less an OB, but even a primary care physician. A lot of these high risk pregnancies, they just show up when the baby's here. They haven't had any prenatal care. So he said, okay, how much does that cost? And, how do we do it? And I worked through all of that. And our first year, we gave birth to 89 babies. And I was able to get support of both Democrats and Republicans because however you feel about abortion, however you feel about it, if there are going to be more high risk pregnancies, you've got to find a way to solve that problem. And I think that that's certainly a program that we could take statewide to have more, rural midwife fellows or, and see where the spaces and places are that we could make a difference there. But it is incredibly important, I think, to have someone, say like me, who's had the experiences that I've had, a mom, to be able to say, this is unacceptable. That law is not just terrifying on the level of like, my daughter has less rights than her grandmother had. It is terrifying on a personal level to think of what that could mean. So I'm very proud of that program, and it's still going, and we're still seeing results every year. It's really important that even when there are obstacles, we find ways around them.
Jerri, the cost of groceries.
Mm.
You had a very unique take on this, on what you could implement when I heard you speak in Alamo a few weeks ago. So can you talk to us about a solution that you had proposed?
Well, I told you I have 3 children. 2 of them are teenagers. My oldest is a 15-year-old boy, and I think he's a bottomless pit. So I see the effects of Trump's tariff policies every week when we go to the grocery store. It's outrageous. And I don't know they keep telling us like inflation isn't real and groceries aren't that expensive and the cost of eggs or whatever isn't that high. It's just so untrue. And it's so very knowable by every working family that goes to the grocery store every week. And even I was at a small restaurant last week in McMinnville, and the restaurant owner was there, and he was like, the prices are just, it's almost impossible to stay in business. And he's been in business for 37 years. So my idea is to end the grocery tax. I think it's an easy way for us to see immediate results for working families. I actually have called for Governor Lee to pause the grocery tax, at least on weekends, at least until SNAP funding is resumed in full. Because I feel like we're in an emergency situation, and we do sales tax holidays like for back to school. We should be doing it right now to help families. I think that it's, people are like, oh my gosh, what if we're going to lose all that tax money? Well, the thing is, right now, the average Tennessean pays about 10% in taxes of their annual income, and the top 1% pays 3.8%. So the burden is falling on those who can least afford to pay for it. I would shift the burden back on the top 1% and repeal the tax breaks that Bill Lee gave to corporations and billionaires this last budget. So there's definitely a way, if your focus is on families, that you can do it. And let me show you how this is truly my economic theory / plan. So like, let's say a family has SNAP. Let's not even talk about the repealing the grocery tax. If they have SNAP benefits, then they can go to the farmer's market, and they can then pay the farmer, who can pay the repairman to fix his tractor. And that repairman can then go to his favorite restaurant in town, and that restaurateur can then buy his 16-year-old, a used car from the used car dealer. You see, like, giving SNAP benefits doesn't just help that one family get food. And that's important because 1 in 5 kids goes to bed hungry every night in Tennessee. And Memphis has the leading food insecurity for seniors in the nation. We're talking about the most vulnerable among us. We should be feeding them in the richest country in the world, not sitting on billions of dollars of rainy day funds. But it doesn't just help them. It helps the whole community. And so that's my economic plan, is to start with families, start with the most vulnerable among us, and make them more stable, more able to get to work and afford a house and afford groceries, so that then pours back into our communities. Because when our communities thrive, then businesses come.
Jerri, I'm so grateful for your time, but there's a question I have to ask, right?
Yes, Ann.
The Tennessee GOP has a supermajority trifecta, like a Republican governor, a House of Representatives, and a Senate. How is it going to be possible for a Democratic nominee to win this office?
Well, I hope last Tuesday gave everybody some hope, because there were 2 Democratic women who were public servants who became governors in New Jersey and in Virginia. And they not only moved the needle at the top of the ticket, but they moved the needle across all of their counties as well. And they weren't close wins as projected. They were double-digit wins. And we saw that across the country, from Supreme Court justices in Pennsylvania to county electeds in Georgia and Mississippi. Mississippi ended their supermajority. So we can do it. And I know sometimes it seems like we're facing the impossible, but Mondami, the first time that he was polled at 1%. So, and then he went on to not only beat the Republicans, but the Democratic establishment twice. They put millions and millions and millions of dollars against him to beat him. And he still won because he was talking to the issues that matter to people, like affordability. And again, in a state like New York City is blue, but the rest of the counties are generally not. And they all moved to the left. So I think there is a lot of momentum swinging our way. The independents and even some Republicans who voted for Trump and for his acolytes like Marsha Blackburn, like John Rose, are having buyer's remorse. And they're sick of the chaos. They want some more common sense. They're sick of the cruelty. They want some more compassion. They want someone with some backbone and some brains, right? And I think I offer all of that in spades. So I encourage people to look to the examples around us and know that it can happen. Our neighbor to the north, Kentucky, has Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, and everybody just said it is rule, it is red. And then Andy Beshear won. And he won with a very small margin his first race. And then he's continued to increase that margin with each victory. It can be done. And I think it's actually a great check on a supermajority. If you feel like things are getting out of hand and they're not listening to people, whether it is about vouchers or affordability, if you're a farmer and they're not taking your concerns seriously, whatever it is, I think that having a Democratic governor in place that can work together on issues like jobs or roads or whatever is good. And then if they're going to continue to push ridiculous, legislation around like banning books or discriminating against LGBTQ people, it's great to have a governor who can stand up and say, no, we're not doing this. This is not what democracy is about. Our diversity is our strength. And I think that's what Andy Beshear does. I think that that's what the people want. They really, I have new shirts out that say, make government boring again. I think that's where people are now. They would like to call me about a pothole, or like they do here in city council about a missing recycling bin, instead of about like the fall of democracy. So there should be some hope out there that we're seeing it done across the country. And even here in Tennessee, the special election that's happening in C7, that in the primary, Afton Bain, she moved the needle there by 14 points in the primary, and she's pulling neck and neck right now against Van Epps, who again has been endorsed by Trump and is, like Marsha or John Rose, somebody who just falls right in line with all of his policies. And they redrew that district on purpose to make it red. And the fact that she is in a neck and neck race really speaks to the climate of the country and our state right now. So I think we can do it. We can do it.
Do you, in the gubernatorial race, face the same challenges when it comes to gerrymandering?
No, I mean, that's the great thing about the state is they can't gerrymander the whole state. We're not up against that. What we're up against instead is voter enthusiasm and voter turnout. So we have to turn out our big blue dots like Shelby County, Davidson County, Hamilton County. We have to talk to the people in rural areas and remind them that our policies are more effective and more favorable for them, and that we actually care. We're showing up, listening. I mean, I've done 6 tours across the state. I've talked to people from over 35 counties already, and my opponents haven't had town halls in 7 years. So we have to do that. And then, we can't leave out our suburbs either. There's a big swing happening right now in our suburbs, especially with moms, right? Moms who believe in public education, moms who go to the grocery store and see how high everything costs, moms who take their elderly loved ones to the doctors and worry whether they're going to be able to afford their care. All of that matters. And we need to make sure that whether you're in a city, a suburb, or a small town, that we turn up and turn out to vote.
I think my call to action, Jerri, would be that we just need to be active participants in the narrative of our democracy. And your voice is your vote. And that's how I would like to sum that up. But are there any words of encouragement that you would like to leave us with?
Well, I have taken a big leap of faith by jumping into this race. And what I ask everyone to do with me is to take that leap of faith too. And that's really the hardest part. You can't do anything that you don't believe in. So I ran the St. Jude Marathon many years ago. Once, I didn't need to run it twice. And you have to be a little crazy to do that and to do what I'm doing now. But what it taught me was that even when you think you can't go on, right? Even when it's hard. Like when you called me tonight and you said, "Are you tired?" And I was like, "I've been tired since I had kids. I don't know anything but tired." Even when you're tired, really, it's not about that. It's a mental game. You just have to put one foot in front of the other. You have to take one more breath and you have to move forward. So this is going to be a tough race. It is going to be a hard year. I know that. I knew it getting in. It's going to be hard on my family. I'm talking to you tonight while I'm juggling soccer and swim and packing lunches. All of that's still part of my life while I'm trying to work on these big issues with you. But I know as a mom, I put one foot in front of the other, take another breath, another step, and just move forward. And so that's what I need people to do. If we do that together, we will cross this finish line. When we cross this finish line, I want us to be proud of the work we've put in, and I want us to win. So that's what I'm asking everybody. Run through the tape with me, please.
Oh, thank you for an inspiring conversation. Guys, please check out Jerri Green's website to actually engage and look and to see what her platform is. And that's greenforgovernor.com. And again, Jerri, thank you so much for your time. I often end the podcast with, and as always, get to the top of your mountain. And so just keep on moving forward, sister. I know that there are many, many moms that your message is going to resonate with. And guys, we cannot just sit back and let things happen. We have got to speak up for our kids. We have got to speak up for our families. And you know what? We cannot be working ourselves to a bone all the time. So, Jerri, thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
look forward to following you on your race. And if there's anything I can ever help with, please let me know.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to winning and then seeing you on Disability Legislative Day. I'll welcome you up there.
There you go. There you go. Have a great evening, Jerri.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.